Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Imagine this scenario. A really bad injury, massive blood loss. It's terrifying, and it's actually the top preventable killer in trauma cases.
Really is.
But what if there was something simple, like an injection given quickly, that could dramatically boost your chances of surviving?
That sounds like science fiction almost.
But it's not. It's actually the very promising result from a new study we're digging into today.
Exactly. And this deep dive is all about an experimental peptide treatment. A peptide is, like a small piece of a protein.
Right.
And it's aimed at tackling hemorrhagic shock. That's the life-threatening condition you get from losing a whole lot of blood.
So we're going to unpack the science behind it, how it might work.
Precisely. And what it could really mean for emergency medicine down the line.
Okay, and where are we getting our info? You mentioned the study.
Yep. Our main source is the scientific paper itself. It was published in Scientific Reports just recently, May 2025.
And we've also got a health news article.
That's right, from Medical Express, also May 2025. It helps give us a bit of broader context on the research.
Great. So our mission for you listening today is pretty clear then.
We want you to walk away understanding the core findings of this research.
And grasp the potential implications, like how this could change trauma care.
And also, importantly, what the next steps are to potentially get this treatment to the people who, desperately need it.
Okay, let's jump into the study itself. What exactly were the researchers trying to figure out?
Well, their main aim was to see if activating a particular protein, it's called Protein Kinase C, epsilon, could improve survival.
After severe blood loss.
Yes, and also help keep the body system stable, blood pressure, heart rate, that sort of thing.
And was there a reason they focused on that protein?
There was. Earlier research suggested that this specific protein might play a protective role when tissues are injured because blood flow gets cut off and then restored. That happens in hemorrhagic shock.
Got it. And who was behind this work?
It was a joint effort. Researchers from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem teamed up with the Israel Defense Forces Medical Corps.
Any specific names?
The paper highlights Dr. Ariel Fuhrer and Dr. Maya Simshoni from the Institute for Research in Military Medicine.
Okay, so how did they test this idea? What was the setup?
They used what's called a porcine model. So they conducted the experiments on pigs.
Why pigs?
Their cardiovascular system and overall physiology have quite a few similarities to humans, making them a good model for this kind of trauma research. They focused on controlled hemorrhagic shock.
Right, controlled. So walk us through the actual experiment. What did they do?
Okay, first, they induced the shock. They carefully withdrew 35% of the pig's total blood volume.
That sounds like a significant amount.
It is. Then, the key step. 15 of these animals got an intramuscular injection into the muscle.
Of the peptide.
Exactly, the peptide designed to activate that protein kinase C, epsilon. And they got it quickly, just 5 minutes after the bleeding started.
Okay, 15 got the peptide. What about the others?
8 pigs were the control group. Same blood loss, 35%, but no peptide injection.
So they could compare outcomes.
Precisely. And they also had 2 more pigs that received just the peptide with no blood loss at all.
Ah, to check for safety. To see if the peptide itself caused problems.
Exactly right. Then, for the next 7 hours, they monitored all the animals that had the induced bleeding really closely.
Monitoring what? You mentioned stability earlier.
Yeah, hemodynamic parameters. That means things like blood pressure, heart rate, how much blood the heart is pumping out, cardiac output.
Okay.
They also looked at biochemical stuff in the blood, like lactate levels. High lactate can mean tissues aren't getting enough oxygen. And acid-base balance, which is critical for bodily functions.
Wow, pretty comprehensive monitoring.
And they even went deeper, analyzing mitochondrial function in heart and kidney tissues afterwards.
Mitochondria, the energy factories in our cells.
That's them.
So after all that meticulous work, what did they find? What were the key results?
The headline result was survival. It was dramatically different.
How different?
73% of the pigs that got the peptide treatment survived the full 7-hour follow-up.
Okay. And the control group?
Only 25% survived.
Wow. 73 versus 25%.
Yeah. And statistically, that difference was significant, meaning it's highly unlikely it happened just by chance.
That's a huge difference. What else did they see?
The treated animals were also much more stable hemodynamically. Their blood pressure, heart rate, cardiac output, they held up better compared to the control group.
Especially later on.
Particularly after the first hour or so, yes. Their bodies seemed to cope better with the shock overall.
And the blood markers. Lactate.
Significantly lower lactate levels in the treated group at the 5-hour mark, which suggests, better oxygen delivery to the tissues.
And the acid-base balance.
That was better too. Closer to normal in the treated animals.
Okay, now what about the mitochondria, the energy factories?
Interesting findings there. In the heart mitochondria of the treated animals, they found about a 14% increase in the activity of a crucial part of the energy-making machinery. It's called electron transport chain complex I.
So potentially boosting energy production in the heart cells?
That's the suggestion. They did note some complex details, like some regulatory bits of that complex seemed less active, but the core functional parts were working harder.
Anything else on the cellular level?
They also saw an increase in something called reactive oxygen species in the heart mitochondria of the treated pigs.
Which can sometimes indicate stress, right?
It can, yes. The researchers thought it might be a direct result of that increased complex I activity, like a byproduct of working harder.
Did the treatment prevent tissue damage?
Well, they saw tissue damage in organs like the kidney, heart, and small intestine in both groups, which, frankly, you'd expect after such severe blood loss.
But was it worse in the control group?
There wasn't a statistically significant difference in the amount of damage between the treated and untreated animals.
Okay. And crucially, what about those 2 pigs that only got the peptide? The safety check.
No adverse events. Nothing bad happened to them, which is a good sign for the peptide safety on its own.
Okay, so putting this all together, the implications seem, well, potentially huge for treating severe bleeding.
They really do. This research strongly suggests that activating protein kinase C epsilon could be a powerful therapeutic approach.
Giving first responders, maybe military medics or paramedics, a new tool.
Exactly. A tool to use right at the point of injury in those critical early moments to improve chances of survival in both battlefield and civilian trauma.
You mentioned earlier that restoring blood flow can sometimes cause its own problems. Ischemic reperfusion injury.
Yes, that's a real challenge. Current treatments often involve giving lots of fluids fast. It's vital, but the rush of blood back into oxygen-starved tissues can sometimes cause more damage.
A paradox, almost.
It is. And the hope here is that this peptide approach might help minimize that secondary damage, leading to better overall outcomes, fewer complications down the road.
And the way they gave the peptide an injection into the muscle, that seems important too.
Absolutely. Intramuscular injection is very practical in emergency settings. Much easier and faster for a first responder than trying to get an IV line in sometimes chaotic conditions.
So it could realistically be used early on.
That's the potential advantage. It opens the door for developing targeted treatments that can be deployed right at the start of trauma care.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly promising, but research always has limitations, right? We need a balanced view.
Absolutely essential. And this study is no exception. First and foremost, it was done in pigs.
Not humans.
Correct. While pigs are a good model, we can't just assume these results will translate directly to people. We definitely need clinical trials in humans to confirm this works and is safe for us.
What about the number of animals? You said 15 treated, 8 controls.
Yes, these sample sizes were relatively small. That's often a constraint in large animal studies because of cost and ethical considerations about minimizing animal use.
So larger studies would be better for confidence.
Ideally, yes. Larger numbers give you more statistical power.
Were there any other aspects of the study design itself that are worth noting as limitations?
A few things. The study wasn't blinded, meaning the researchers knew which animals got the peptide and which didn't.
Which could potentially introduce bias.
It's a possibility, which is why blinding is preferred when possible. Also, they didn't use a placebo control, like an injection of saline solution for the control group.
Okay. And the setting, it was a lab, right?
Yes, a controlled lab environment. The animals were under anesthesia, on mechanical ventilators getting 100% oxygen. That's quite different from a real-world trauma scene.
How might that affect things?
Well, those control conditions might influence the body's responses, like blood pressure and heart rate, compared to what happens in a more chaotic pre-hospital setting.
And the bleeding itself was controlled, you said?
Right. They withdrew a specific amount of blood methodically. Real-world trauma often involves uncontrolled bleeding, which can be, well, messier and more complex physiologically.
Any other scientific caveats?
One more subtle point is that while they saw the effects like increased mitochondrial activity, They didn't directly prove that the peptide activated protein kinase C epsilon, as expected, or map out all the downstream cellular signals.
So the link between the peptide and the observed effects, while strongly suggested, isn't fully confirmed mechanistically yet.
That's a fair way to put it. There's still work to do to connect all the dots at the molecular level. Oh, and one more thing, they only used female pigs.
So we don't know if males would respond the same way.
Correct. Sex can sometimes influence physiological responses, so that needs to be considered for future studies.
It's always good to hear from the researchers themselves. Did Dr. Fuhrer comment on the findings?
He did. He really emphasized how challenging massive hemorrhage is in emergency medicine. A critical problem.
But he's optimistic about this approach.
Very much so. He stated his belief that activating protein kinase C epsilon could, and I think I'm quoting roughly here, transform trauma care. But he also immediately followed up by stressing the need for clinical trials in humans.
Acknowledging the current stage of the research.
Exactly. Prudent optimism.
And what was the study's own main takeaway message? How did the author summarize it?
In the paper, they conclude that in their pig model, this peptide treatment led to better early survival, more stable vital signs, and that boost in heart mitochondrial function.
But they also called for more research.
Absolutely. They specifically highlighted the need for further investigation, especially looking at how this might work in settings that better mimic pre-hospital trauma scenarios.
This has been a fascinating look at some really potentially impactful science.
It really has. Just think about it for a moment, the idea that a single injection given quickly after a severe injury could fundamentally change someone's prognosis, could dramatically boost their odds.
It offers a real glimpse into a possible future for trauma care, doesn't it?
It does. A future where intervening right at the point of injury makes a massive difference. And it makes you wonder, what other biological pathways are out there waiting to be understood? Pathways that could hold similar keys to saving lives in critical moments.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface.
Exactly. This research is a significant step, but it really highlights how much more we can potentially learn to better equip our first responders and improve outcomes for the most severely injured patients.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.